I can't imagine how 2024 is going to top it. I really can't. Hey everyone, welcome or welcome back to my channel. I'm Leandra, the TBR0, and my goal is to lessen my physical TBR one book at a time. In front of me, I have 12 books, and this is my best books video of 2023. I am so excited because I upped my favorites from 9 to 12, mainly because I read so many more books this year. I read over 100. That was not my expectation. It's the first time I've ever read over 100 books, and so it was a great year of reading. I am doing the same thing I did last year, though, where I did 9 favorite books from 9 different genres, and so in front of me I have 12 books, each representing a different genre, because I read everything, and I think it's really awesome that I'm able to point out a favorite from every single genre I tried this year. It just, honestly, it's so fun. And so I hope that depending on the type of reader you are, you will be able to find at least one book in this stack that you might think, I could try that in 2024. So let's just get into it. I don't know how much I'll remember about these books, if I'm going to be completely honest, but I did read them throughout the year. Like, there are some that I read at the beginning of the year in maybe January, February, March, and then there are quite a few that I read just this past month in November, and also one that I finished in December. So it's pretty exciting to know that I didn't have one bad month this year. Before we get into my best books of 2023, I just want to thank everyone for making this such a great year. Not only did these reads make my year, but so did you. You all helped me grow my channel so much. I found so many great friends, such a great, strong, vibrant community here, and this is my second year on booktube, actually. My second year anniversary comes at the beginning of January, and so it's just, honestly, I am feeling so many different happy emotions right now, and so I wanted to make sure that you knew that the best books of 2023 is a highlight, but so are you. So thanks so much for subscribing, for liking, for commenting, or simply watching the video and being consistent with it, or not being consistent with it, because life happens. So yeah, all the thanks. Now on to these lovely, lovely best books. The first book that I'm going to talk about on this list is The Wedding Season by Katie Birchall. This is my best book in romance. I had so much fun reading this, specifically because it was a buddy read. You're going to see a trend here. A lot of the books that I talk about are either because friends have told me about them or because I read them with said friend. And so I read this with Carly over at Bookish Pixie Reads. She is on YouTube, but she's also on Instagram. And we both decided to read this together because we read The Secret Bridesmaid by the same author, and spoiler, that book ended up being my favorite romance book in 2022. And so Katie Birchall, you are 2 for 2, and I'm just so impressed. This one I will say I don't like as much as The Secret Bridesmaid, but it still got 5 stars for me. Freya is our main character. What I thought was really interesting about her is that we open up just the day before her wedding, or maybe it was the day of, I can't remember, but her fiance Matthew ends up ending their engagement on that day. All of the plans are ruined. Freya feels as though she's been ostracized, and she's extremely embarrassed. She doesn't know what to do, especially because her specific wedding was supposed to kick off an entire wedding season where she then, I believe, is meant to attend 7 weddings, some of them where Matthew will be there. And so she basically has to find a way to cope, to kind of get over this horrific moment, while also trying to support her friends, her family members who are getting married, because she certainly doesn't want to have the negative things that have happened to her to harm their beautiful days. And I really loved it. It was super quirky, so fun, and just kind of a ridiculous time. And her love interest was honestly the best. It's very much an almost enemies to lovers, but then it switches very quickly, which I appreciated, to more of an opposites attract. They become friends first, her and her love interest, after they have a bit of a rocky start, which we love to see, and then they both kind of learn from each other because they're so different. And yeah, it was such a wholesome time. I highly recommend this for those who like very sweet romances, especially romances that have positive themes of growth beyond the romance itself. I felt like Freya grew as a person, which I actually really like when we have that dynamic, and Katie Birchall is so good at that. Switching gears, my favorite sci-fi for this year was Dead Silence by S.A. Barnes, and this one was another buddy read. I read this with Danny over at Danny Dabbles. It was actually our first buddy read ever, which honestly means that it has a very special place in my heart no matter what. And this was so fun. I think that it has renewed my love of sci-fi. I'm a big sci-fi fan. Back back in the day, especially cli-fi novels, those that focus on climate fiction, on environmentalism, and this book kind of does actually, but what I really liked about it was the atmosphere. It was extremely atmospheric. It's not a perfect book, I will admit, but I really enjoyed the eerie feels, especially once the ship arrives, our main characters arrive and enter this luxury cruise ship that is meant to basically be a ghost ship. No one's meant to be on there, no one's alive. It's been missing for, I believe, 6 months, and so when they happen upon this, it is big news. You hear that? People are getting in their cars, running off to tell others about this book. And so I loved the eeriness. I loved the kind of silences that were especially eerie, and then the voices, the sounds that were coming from those silences when there wasn't meant to be anyone else on this ship. And you're just always guessing, you're trying to figure out what's going on. There's a dual timeline as well, where we are going from after the events to leading up to the events. And it's just, I don't know, it's a wild ride. It's a really quick read. I'm really excited because S.A. Barnes is coming out with Ghost Station, another book, I believe, in this world, but it's not necessarily a sequel. I think they're both standalones. That one comes out in April, and so you know that I'll be reading it, and I'll probably be having Danny read it with me. Also note, this is a genre blend. It's sci-fi, but also horror, but I'm putting it as my sci-fi best read because I have a different book in mind for horror. So I am just keeping you on your toes this entire video because now I'm switching gears again to something more wholesome once more, and that is Cat Plus Gamer Volume 1. Now this is the first in a manga series, and the author is Wataru Nadatani. I read this in November thanks to the mid-month chaos event held by Rainy for her readathon, and oh my gosh, I love it. I've already read book 2. I cannot wait to devour this as soon as my library gets more copies. I had to buy a copy myself because I loved it so much, and yeah, it's just so sweet. It's a great starter manga for those who want something that's set in a realistic place. It follows a woman who's 29. She is a big gamer, and she ends up rescuing this cat that was discovered in the parking lot of her workplace, and doesn't really know what she's doing. She's never owned a cat before. I don't think she's ever owned a pet before, and she ends up kind of motivating herself by treating the cat as if she needs to level up. She needs to become a more skilled player, like an NPC kind of situation, where she's interacting with the cat, learning from it, getting new obstacles from the cat to kind of like up her skill level as a cat owner. And it's really adorable. It's so wholesome. Yeah, get on this train. Next, I'm going to talk about my best nonfiction of this year, and that is Islands of Abandonment by Cal Flynn. This one has been on my shelves since I bought it in 2020, and then I proceeded not to read it, but I ended up finally picking it up this year, and it took me a few weeks, I'm not gonna lie, because each chapter is so chock full of information and it's a bit isolated in the information that Cal Flynn gives that I didn't feel like I needed to rush through it. And what's really great about it is that it's environmentalist, which is another thing that I'm trying to get back into because I'm a huge environmentalist reader when it comes to nonfiction, and so this was the perfect kind of taste test getting back into a bit of a nostalgic genre for me, a subgenre within nonfiction. And so what Cal Flynn does is she ends up bringing us to these isolated places in which humans once inhabited and devastation occurred, whether it be by human hands or maybe a natural disaster, something to that effect, in which human life left, and then the scars left by humans, how nature rebounded. And this isn't necessarily a story that we are meant to feel as though, oh, it's okay for us to harm the earth now because we know the earth can heal itself, because the earth doesn't fully heal. It has to adapt. It's a redemption story as far as some of the ugly things that the earth has just had to accept that we've done to it, but still thrive or find ways to survive nonetheless. And it was beautiful. It was so informative. I'm just so glad I read it. Of course, 5 stars. The next book on this list is going to be in the category of space opera, and that is Hunt the Stars by Jessie Mihalik. This is the first book in her Starlight Shadow series. She has quite a few space opera series, and honestly, like, Jessie Mihalik is such a great writer. You have to check her out. With this one though, it follows Octavia Zarola and Torrin Fletcher. So Tavi, she is a bounty hunter, but she was a soldier in the war, and there's a lot of nuances to it, a lot of discussions, and I really loved the world building in this particular trilogy, and this was just the first. Tavi and Torrin, they are 100% enemies to lovers. They both were higher up soldiers, captains or sergeants, or however the military works. And so they were on opposite sides. They'd hurt each other's reputations. There are certain rumors about each other and how cold and sometimes quite violent they have been known to be. And so then they end up in the situation where now the war is over, they're trying to continue with life, and Tavi is being hired by Torin to find this very specific family heirloom item that they need, and they know that Tavi is the best of the best, so they need to hire her. But that means that when she accepts, her crew that were veterans, past soldiers, and then Torin's crew have to all somehow coincide, live amongst each other on this one ship, and it is just super tense, and we love it, especially because Tavi and Torin end up just having this awesome romance while there's all this adventure going on, because it's a space opera, because they're traveling through space and trying to figure out what's going on. There's a mystery happening. You know that I'm totally into it. There's also a great representation in side characters as far as like polyamory and diversity of the cast. We also have a very interesting element of telepathy going on, which I really like, both as far as thoughts but also emotions, which is really interesting, and just honestly telekinetics. It's great. Definitely go read it. The 6th book I'm going to talk about is actually the only one I don't own, which is very sad. That one is Bloom by Delilah S. Dawson. The reason why I don't own it is because I literally just read it a week ago and it was a friend's copy and I've returned it to her, and that one is the winner in my horror category. It was honestly so fascinating. It's only about 200 pages. It's a sapphic horror, and it follows our main character Ro. She visits this farmer's market in a city that she's still trying to get to know. She's an academic. She works at the local college, and as she's visiting this farmer's market, she befriends this woman named Ash, and one thing leads to another. They get closer and closer, and then they begin this romantic relationship, and it's just kind of this whirlwind romance. However, nothing is as it seems, especially for Ro, because Ro is so used to a heteronormative experience. She's only ever been with women. She's only ever been with men prior to Ash, and so this is her first experience with a woman romantically, and so it's really hard for her to be able to decipher what a red flag would be in a woman's relationship versus what a red flag would be when she's been with men. And she kind of begins to realize how deep she's gotten herself into, and it is just amazing. The back of the book described this as cottage gore, and I was like, yes, that's exactly what it is. I loved it. It's great for anyone who wants a bit more of a campy horror, where everything's a bit more subtle. You feel this big reveal happening, this big ending happening, and yeah, it's honestly, it was awesome. I'm so excited to get to know Delilah S. Dawson as an author more, because I have a couple other books of hers on the shelf, but in completely different genres, and so I'm really excited to see how versatile she is. Now that we are halfway through this list, I'm actually going to be moving from the horror category to what is the YA category, but also the fantasy category. I don't tend to read fantasy very often, I realized, and especially adult fantasy, which is something I do want to change about myself. So really these two categories have been combined. And that is Little Thieves by Margaret Owen. I loved this book so much. I have Painted Devils, the 2nd book in this series as well. I've already pre-ordered the 3rd book, but unfortunately it seems as though it might not even come until 2025 now, which is so upsetting. But I really enjoyed this one because it follows a great character. It is a fairy tale retelling, and it's just honestly such a fun ride. The humor is sharp. I loved the dialogue. My favorite element was the character dynamic. The cast of characters was just so strong in this. I really loved the relationships going on. There is a bit of a mystery as far as what's happening to Vanya, how she breaks the curse that she put on herself, because being a great character, you're gonna get into some trouble. I ended up really loving this. I read it the same month that I read Painted Devils, and both of these were gifted to me by the author and publisher for a book tour, which was like honestly so serendipitous. I'm so grateful, and it was such a fun time. It's a chunker. They're both about 500 pages, but I think it's worth it for those who love character-driven books in which yes, the plot is kind of a bit chaotic and crazy, and the ending is as dramatic as can be, but the characters are what you stay for. The characters are what you continue to read for, and I really loved it. I loved the diversity. I loved the LGBTQ plus representation, especially because we do see some ace representation in here. We do see a variety of characters that are a part of the queer community, and it's just, yeah, it's really lovely to see in YA especially. Going from YA to middle grade, my favorite middle grade this year is actually a genre blend, and it was a mystery mixed with a fantasy. No One Leaves the Castle by Christopher Healy. I've talked about this book in a couple videos at this point. I mentioned it because it was a host favorite for Get a Clue Readathon. I just mentioned it in my have read book haul because I ended up buying it because I loved it so much. This one was a Netgalley arc originally, and I read it on my Kindle. Honestly, could not put it down. It was so great. It was perfect for when I was reading it as well because I was in a bit of a slump, and so I kind of needed a fun read, and that's exactly what this is. It follows two lovely main characters, a bit of a Sherlock and Watson situation going on. Lilac is a bounty hunter come sleuth, and her best friend, also Bard, who sings her adventures along the way, Dulcinea. They end up finding themselves at this castle, and at first they're investigating a theft, and then a murder happens. And unfortunately, the murder is done to a wizard who obviously has certain magical abilities, and it seems as though he cast a spell just before his death that encased the entire castle in a bubble, and that bubble is slowly shrinking, meaning that these characters are stuck within the castle. They can't go anywhere, and that also means the murder is among them. There are secret passageways, there are other magical creatures on staff, and it's really just such a fun time, especially because the dialogue is hilarious. I found it so funny. I cannot express to you that as an adult, the humor was on point, and I could see myself laughing along with it like every single time I reread it. Honestly, just go try it out, especially if you're someone who likes genre blends where you want to try a mystery, but maybe you need something else, a little bit of spice with it. Not that kind of spice, obviously. The fantasy elements are really fun. We are down to our last 4 books of 12 as far as my favorites per genre go, and I'm going to be honest with you, they're all mysteries, but they're in different subgenre categories of mystery. I have a more like modern also / genre blend for adult fiction mystery. I have a classic mystery, and then I have a cozy mystery, and finally historical mystery, because I'm a big mystery reader, so I had to stretch the genre to encompass all the different types that I read, so there we are. The first one I want to talk about is one that I just read in November, and it is genuinely thanks to Get a Clue Readathon. The only reason why I picked it up was because it fit a prompt, and I honestly had the best time. It might have been my favorite book of the year just because I had so much fun with it, but honestly, I can't choose among all of these because they were all so great. The Affair of the Mysterious Letter by Alexis Hall. This is my first experience with him as an author, but I hear that it's nothing like anything else he's written, so I am intrigued to try one of his other books to see if I still like that style, but this one was obviously just written for me, I think. So it is a mystery reimagining of the Holmes-Watson dynamic, but set in a fantastical world. And I'm telling you, a fantastical world in which there are fantastical supernatural beings, there are different worlds, different dimensions, different empires at war. Like, it is thorough for being such a short book. The world is complex. And instead of Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson, we have our sorceress, Scheherazade Haas, and her very loyal writing companion, Captain John Wyndham. I just cannot express how fun this was. Scheherazade Haas was a firecracker. She was a spitfire, and I just loved how she really didn't care who she pissed off at any point in time, and she was like, you know what, it's gonna kill me one day. And when that happens, it happens. But for now, I'm going to find a way out of these things. And it just, honestly, like, I love being in the world. I didn't even care about the mystery, even though the mystery was also super compelling. What happens is one of Scheherazade Haas's lovers, she is engaged to another woman, and this engagement is kind of high profile, and she ends up receiving these kind of blackmail letters saying, don't marry this person, I know what you've done, whatever the case is. And so she comes to Haas as an ex-lover saying, hey, can you help me out so that I can be happy with my fiance? And so Haas is like, okay, fine, I'll help you out. And so they traverse the city. They go into an underwater city. They have to battle vampires. They face off with a necromancer. Like, this thing is bonkers in the best way possible, all while Wyndham, our writer, is writing all of this down, chronicling the entire events that are happening, which is very much Sherlock Watson-esque, and I loved that element. I also do believe that I have an argument for one of the characters being a trans character in this. It's not said aloud to my understanding, but I'm very confident that one of the characters is trans, and I really appreciated that, especially because in this kind of setting, you just don't really know what to expect. Sometimes it's unfortunate, but historical mysteries or fantastical mysteries, they don't really think to provide that type of diversity, not including race, but also gender, sexuality. And so it's not surprising, though, if I'm going to be honest with Alexis Hall, we shouldn't be surprised that Hall would provide that type of representation, but it was really amazing to see. I really appreciated it, and it was so fun. I can 100% see myself rereading this, and I think the saddest thing is that there is never a sequel coming. We're never going to see Shahrazad Haas and John Wyndham facing off any other mysteries again, I don't think. Unless, Hall, if you're watching this, maybe do another one for me. Next is a bit of a surprise for me, but it's one that I have to talk about because I've mentioned it so many times on my channel, on reading sprints, and elsewhere in my life, and that is Deadline at Dawn by Cornell Woolrich. Now, this one, I actually only gave 4 stars, and it's a classic mystery set in the 40s, if I remember correctly, written in the 40s, and I didn't think I would like this, first and foremost. I also have given other mysteries 5 stars. So why am I choosing a 4-star read that also is in a genre that I don't tend to read very often, specifically hard-boiled detective fiction? My own focus is Golden Age, which is very much a different tone, different themes, and so I have to put this on this list because I can't stop thinking about it. It's not a perfect mystery. The reason why I dropped it to 4 stars was because the ending very much went into the hard-boiled detective fiction vein of just wild happenings. There's no way for you to have truly guessed the murderer kind of situation because it's just a wild ride. But I love the dynamic between these two characters. Bricky and Quinn are so fascinating. They make you question the gender role norms of this time, especially because Bricky, she is the one who is the independent, strong, rational person. She's the one who puts emotions aside to make sure that they survive the night. And Quinn, he's far more sensitive. He's submissive to her. He is subordinate to her goals and her plan of action. And I found that so interesting. The events happen over one night as well. They meet at, I believe, like 11 p.m. or midnight, and events happen. There's a murder. They have to solve the murder before they both can get on a bus together at 6 a.m. to basically escape New York City, because New York City is alive in this setting. New York City is this dark monster that you can't just seem to get away from. It always pulls you back, and I loved the dark setting. Cornell Woolrich, you'll see in the introduction, apparently he was very much inspired by F. Scott Fitzgerald in his writing, and you can tell that he is very literary and writes beautifully in like kind of a dark, somber way as this mystery is happening. And yeah, even though I gave it 4 stars, it's not perfect. I just can't stop thinking about it, so I had to put it on my best books. That's just, you love when books do that. I just mentioned this book in my last video for the kindness book tag, but I have to talk about it again. A Good Day to Pie. It's the second book in the Pies Before Guys mystery series by Misha Popp. It is lovely. It has basically an American version of the Great British Bake Off. Daisy is not only a baker, but she's an amateur sleuth, and she has magical abilities to infuse various elements into her pies. She can make someone happier, she can make someone focused, but she can also kill someone. And so I highly recommend you read the first book to fully understand what her abilities are and how they really work. But this book, honestly, was better than the first one. I've decided it's done, that I love this book way more. I had so much fun with it. I was listening to the audiobook as I was on a road trip, and it was the perfect companion. The wholesomeness of this, the diversity, the inclusivity across the various types of bakers within this competition is just so lovely. They're so supportive of each other. I was honestly tearing up when the reveal occurred as far as who won the overall, grand prize for the show. And the mystery was compelling as well, because of course there's got to be a murder. It's a murder mystery, but it's also a cozy. And I have to make sure people are aware that quosies exist. queer cozies. There are cozies out there. They're getting published more and more. They're just honestly such a lovely light to see, and we need to support these authors as much as we can. And the final book on this best books list of 12 across 12 different genres slash subgenres includes The Murder Wheel by Tom Mead. Now, the genre I'm placing this under is specifically historical mysteries. It's a subgenre under mystery, and I'm categorizing it as such because it is a very different vibe compared to a classic detective fiction mystery that was written and set in the early 20th century. This one was published this year, but it's set in the 1930s, and I think that it has a different vibe. You've got to enter this type of book with different expectations, and so that's why I have to kind of categorize them differently. This one is the second book in the Joseph Spector mystery series. The first one is Death and the Conjurer. I read that last year, loved it. What's so great about it is it focuses specifically on locked room mysteries, and what perfect detective for that than an illusionist. So Joseph Spector, he is such this mysterious fellow. We don't really know him. Characters are seeing him in different lights. There's this one description in the first book where one person looks at him and sees him as this very young person, but then in a different light, he looks like he's aged and he is more than 100 years old. And it's just his entire appearance, his entire personality is an illusion in itself, and it's very fun to know that our detective is a mystery. He's a bit of an enigma. And so I ended up reading this book with Danni as a buddy read. I was so happy when she suggested that we could read this together, and she was down for it because I got her unintentionally to read Death and the Conjurer. She really enjoyed it, and so I think I'm making a mystery reader out of her. Tom Mead is an expert in detective fiction. Specifically, he is a huge fan of John Dixon Carr, who is known for the locked room mystery, and so I believe that this series is a bit of an homage to that specific classic writer. And so Joseph Spector finds himself solving various locked room mysteries and different types of mysteries, so murder, theft across the series, and his favorite thing to do is to analyze these supposedly impossible crimes and show just how mundane they are, just how possible and plausible they are, and it's a great time. I definitely recommend this for anyone who wants a quick read, who's never really read historical mysteries before and they don't know where to start. I think this one is super accessible, it's super fun, and no, in Murder Wheel, the main character is not a 12-year-old lawyer, as Danni thought for far too long. He is a 29-year-old lawyer, and it's just, you'll know what I'm talking about if you ever pick this up. And those are my 12 best books in 2023 across 12 different genres. I honestly had such a great year. I know I said that in my introduction to this video, but like, I can't imagine how 2024 is going to top it. I really can't. But I am looking forward to seeing it try. I'm just so pleased. If you can, let me know in the comments if you've read any of these, if I've convinced you to try any of them, but also maybe list a few of your own favorite reads from 2023. That could be really fun to see. Thanks everyone for being here, whether it be in this video, throughout the year, or any other time in between, and I really do hope to see you in the next one. Okay, bye!